Imagine a heated Champions League final where the rival team captains are Lionel Messi and Diego Maradona, two of the greatest soccer players in history, going head-to-head on the pitch. Or picture a tense NBA playoff clash where Michael Jordan, the legendary Chicago Bulls icon, faces off against LeBron James, a modern-day basketball titan. Envision a thrilling Formula One race where the top contenders are Lewis Hamilton, the dominant force of our era, and Ayrton Senna, the revered champion of the past. While the dream of witnessing such legendary matchups may seem nearly impossible in most sports due to the limited careers of athletes, chess presents a unique exception. In the world of chess, legends can continue to compete for many years, giving them the rare opportunity to face prodigies from future generations. This brings us to a legendary game between two chess greats, Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen. Garry Kasparov and Magnus Carlsen are two of the greatest chess players ever, each ruling the chess world in his own time. Garry Kasparov, the champion from 1985 to 2000, was famous for his strong attacks and deep opening moves, while Magnus Carlsen, who rose to prominence in the 21st century, is known for his smart and flexible play, often winning with excellent endgame skills. Both players have not only won many tournaments, but have also helped make chess more popular around the world. Today's game took place in Reykjavik, Iceland, in 2004. At this time, Kasparov was at his peak, being the #1 rated player in the world. Carlsen, on the other hand, was just starting his career. However, at only 13 years old, he already had an impressive rating of 2484 and an international master title. Despite this, the odds were clearly in Kasparov's favor. The arbiters announced the start of the game. Magnus, after adjusting his pieces, waited for Kasparov to show up.
Boring!
And just as Magnus was about to get bored, Kasparov finally arrived. Magnus started the game by moving his pawn to d4. Garry, after adjusting his pieces and considering his options, responded with pawn to d5. And when Magnus pushed his pawn to c4, Garry chose the semi-Slav defense by moving his pawn to c6, knight to f6, and then pawn to e6. Magnus then played his bishop to g5, and in a highly confident move, left the board to check on other games. In response, Garry developed his other knight to d7. Upon seeing this, Magnus quickly returned to the chessboard and moved his pawn to e3. The game continued following normal theory, with both players developing their pieces and eventually castling their kings to prepare for the middle game battle. Garry rerouted his queen to c7, and after Magnus moved his rook to e1, Garry initiated a counterattack by advancing his pawn to h6 and moving his bishop on d6. He then intensified the pressure on the white bishop by moving his knight to b6. Meanwhile, Carlsen retreated his bishop to h4 and secured his h2 pawn by moving it from h2 to h3. Deciding to seize the initiative, and instead of retreating with his white bishop, Magnus opted for the aggressive move bishop takes f6.
I said I'm not afraid anymore! Do you hear me?
Garry was then forced to capture the bishop on c4, which allowed Magnus to continue his attack with the move knight to e4. But why couldn't he just capture the bishop on f6? Let's find out. In chess strategy, the arrangement of pawns on the board creates something called pawn structure. To obtain a strong pawn structure, it is important to keep the pawns next to each other. This allows them to protect each other and close any gaps, thereby protecting the king as well. However, if Garry had decided to capture the bishop with his g-pawn, the pawn structure would have been wrecked, leaving the king and the pawns extremely weak. Now, back to the game. After Magnus played the brilliant move knight to e4, Garry, who seemed nervous, played bishop to h2 check and then escaped with his knight. After Magnus played his bishop to e5, attacking both the queen and the knight, Garry was forced to pin his own knight by playing knight to d6. At this point in the game, it was clear that young Carlsen had a better position, but the question was, would he be able to secure victory despite facing the great experience of Garry Kasparov? Garry then played the only move, rook to d8, to which Magnus responded confidently with pawn to d5. Garry escaped the pin by moving his queen to d7, and Magnus continued his pressure by playing his knight to d4. At this point in the game, despite Magnus becoming short on time, Garry decided to follow the golden advice in chess: always play the board, not the man. Although Garry was the strongest player in the world at this time, he wasn't affected by his ego while playing against a 13-year-old kid. Instead, he decided to be realistic and admitted that his position was worse. So, he decided to use his final attempt to reach a nearly equal position. He started by playing his knight to f5, sacrificing the c6 pawn. Following this, he activated the rest of his pieces by playing rook to e8, queen to e6, and bishop to b7. The activation of the black pieces forced Magnus to accept some exchanges. It started with exchanging knights on d4, followed by exchanging queens on g4, resulting in an endgame with opposite-colored bishops, with Magnus having an extra pawn. Both players kept playing the most accurate moves in the endgame, resulting in some more piece exchanges. However, the fact that the two bishops were opposite-colored made it hard for Magnus to make progress, even with his extra pawn, especially considering he was short on time. The final moment of the game arrived when Kasparov played his bishop to f1, attacking the g2 pawn, which forced Magnus to retreat his bishop to f2, leaving the a5 pawn unprotected. Realizing that the situation after capturing the a5 pawn was a dead draw, both players shook hands and agreed to a draw in a historical moment. This was significant for Magnus, as it showed that even at the age of 13, he could compete with the top-rated player in the world. Only 1 year after this game, specifically in 2005, Kasparov decided to retire from competitive chess. Meanwhile, Carlsen continued progressing in the chess world, reaching the top of the chess ratings in July 2011 and maintaining his position ever since.